And now, get ready for our next session, where the speaker will dive into the transformative role of media and technology in leadership, discussing the opportunities and challenges that comes with the rapid advancement in both fields. Let's welcome Bob Pearson, who is an author and public relations expert, exploring the evolving role of media and technology in shaping leadership. He had consulted for global companies and offers strategic insights into leadership during times of rapid technological advancement. Please let's welcome Bob Pearson.
Thank you. And after I speak, I'll be joined by Emma Graham for a Q&A, so I'm really looking forward to that. What I'm going to talk about today is I feel very fortunate that I'm asked by Fortune 500 companies and also governments to actually look at the 190 plus countries of the United Nations and say, what are the trends that actually matter to all of us? So that's what you're going to see is a little dose of that today, of what's important. So let's get right into it. And one of the things that's really interesting is when you look worldwide, the number one news platform on earth is Meta. Not even close. The number two thing is the mobile phone. The average age of someone gets a phone is 11 years old. And you think of our brains are forming the most between birth and age 25. It's when a lot of the memories and habits are being stored in our brain. So for about 5,000 days, kids are looking at this thing every day for every answer. So we have to think, how do we actually really communicate through the phone? If we look at attention spans, I've talked to Facebook, Pandora, Snapchat, leaders there who look at literally billions of views. And the prevailing thinking is that the actually attention span is about 1 to 2 seconds. And so we are making very quick decisions on what we actually will look at. I'm going to talk a little bit about trust later on, so I won't touch on that. But the other two things that I know certainly government is not in as much as they should be is gaming and message platforms. Gaming is really the next big media platform. There's more than 3 billion people who play. And it's more than playing, as you know. It's really communities of how people get around. So big opportunity for all of us. If I look at what's changing the world, there's a lot of stuff changing the world in terms of technology and media. But I would break it down into audience and agents. Those are two things that if we remember that, that's really important for us as we go. What does that mean? Well, one thing that we see, if we go back in time for the last, say, 15 years, we've been building algorithms that look at any piece of data that's open source in the world. And we've looked at countries, any kind of country you can think of, from like a Japan to a Brazil to you name it. And what you see is on any topic, there's usually not more than 50 people who shape the majority of influence. And so you can see exactly who they are. The other thing is you can see what we call audience architecture, is how does the audience relate to itself, who actually respects who follows who shares when someone does something, and you can see how it shapes itself. So then you can decide, how do I want to impact that audience? So that is actually audience architecture. So it's going beyond impressions and likes and views and visitors, which are good to know, and saying, okay, but I actually want to shape our brand and narrative. How am I going to do that methodically over time? The next thing is when you look at search. When we think of search, we think of Google or Bing or Baidu, we think of a search engine. But really over the next 1 to 2 years, more than 50% of the search that occurs in the world will be happening through agents. Agents that go out and just scrape whatever they can find through open source and bring it back to applications for use. So what does that mean for us in government? It means that, think of a website, simple thing. You have the website, it has your story. What other content do you want agents to pick up? So you might put other tabs in there, and you may have a tab for video, and a tab for studies, and a tab for Q&As. And you're putting in like a library of content because you want to make it easy for agents to pick up our full story. And if we don't do that, what will happen in about 2 more years is we'll be in a room like this, and people will complain that their stories aren't showing up in all these applications that are being formed. So we can anticipate technology and say, how do we actually become better communicators to align with it? Trust. When I see all these trust surveys and they say that trust is going down in government or trust is going down in companies or a particular profession, What you notice about those reports is that they look at the same people each year. And that's a huge mistake, huge. And so what is happening is that trust is not decreasing, trust is diffusing. And Jason, who's right in the front row here, when you were speaking, you're talking about like a Joe Rogan podcast, or you're talking about alternative media. And these are people that people are gravitating towards and listening to, and they believe in them. So we have to say is, where is our story being formed for our government, our country? And who do people trust? And are we aligning with those people? That includes mainstream media. Mainstream media has a very important role, but it's like media plus that we have to be looking at. The next thing, this is something Emma and I probably will talk more about this. And when you think of journalism, journalism is at a crossroads. It's always going to be important. We always want people who are out there to get the truth. That's never going to go away. But the business model of journalism is decreasing in value every day, every year. And everyone knows that. And so the question is, do you stare at it and do nothing and just hope that things will change? That's not going to work. Or do you actually create a new model? So something's happening in media that's actually quite interesting. And it's more of an American thing, but it's, I think, going to be increasingly global. So if you look at Washington Post, the LA Times, Time Magazine, the commonalities there is they're all run or owned by billionaires who have actually built very successful businesses and yet stare at the media model and say, I guess we'll just keep trying harder, right? Why not create a different business model? So if one of us is a journalist and we are, let's say, take Emma, and she's working for CNBC, but she can also get her voice into YouTube and TikTok and X and pick the channels, and she's taking that voice and moving it. Why not split the revenue with Emma? Because now she's making a good living, her production team is making a good living, and we're reaching people where they want to be reached in the ways they want to be reached. So the business model of journalism has to change to enable the power of journalism to really come alive. Listening versus intelligence. Everyone in the room, if you're involved in communications in some way, you have a listening platform that you get every day, you get a dashboard, and everyone worldwide has the same smile on their face when I say, is it effective for you? Because most people, they know it's not. They get too much noise, they get dashboards they don't understand, and it's a waste of time, and they're very expensive. We don't need to be doing that. When you look at the use of analytics, what you can be doing is actually saying, let me build intelligence that I need, as opposed to looking at everything. And what does that mean? With today's technology, something as simple as if I took Dubai and said, AI hub in the future, it's going to be the #1 AI hub in the world. I would say, who are the people, the journalists and the influencers that I need to know worldwide, and I want to track them every day in a new intelligence platform so I know exactly what they're saying, what channels they're doing, what trends they're on, and I don't miss anything. Or if I have a supply chain, I'm part of a bigger effort here because Oracle is building a new data center, and it's going to be here in Dubai. But there's data centers like this worldwide. I want to track all of those data centers worldwide so I know anything happening to Oracle because they're an important partner to us, so we can be on top of that, so we can tell Larry Ellison what's going on with his own company, right? So you take the example, you break it down, you use analytics correctly, and you end up getting intelligence that gives you an edge in the marketplace, and that's so critical versus just listening. Unlocking knowledge at the personal level. So if you think about search engines is something we all know. The next phase of software inside organizations like government is going to be a productivity engine. So we're going to be able to take content and we're going to be able to do things to it. Think of this conference. I just use this conference really quickly as an example. Every single talk that's given goes into an app, and you can translate it into any language in the world immediately. You can do an audio summary, and you say what length you want, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. You change it into bulleted points, or all of the content is actually piped together, and you can query and say who talked about mobile and gaming and something else, and you see all the people who talked about it like that in milliseconds. There's absolutely nothing keeping us from doing that now other than the desire to do it. And so that's the kind of thing that's going to revolutionize conferences like this. Building a knowledge stack. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we only have a minute left, and I want to make sure we get to Q&A. But the tech stack is something we know from IT. And communicators have what we call a knowledge stack. We have to be good at knowing what data are we pulling in. We have to actually think about building our own data puddle. You think of you hear about a data lake. Well, we want a puddle for communication, so it's the information that we need that feeds into the pond, that feeds into the lake, right? And we also want to do things like this. We want AI to be helping us to say, how do we prefer to get information? So next time we get that same information, it's coming to us in the style that we prefer, rather than continuing to get it the way we did it for many years. So there's a lot to this, but in the spirit of time, I'm not going to go through all this. Data governance, we have to get that right. This is something that governments really can do, probably lead everyone on, is how do you take disparate data sets, pull them together, and make sense of them so we can have the best information for our citizens. And I'm going to stop here with this so we can get right to Q&A. But this would be disinformation. As communicators, we also have some policy issues that we need to reframe. And this is one of about 10 examples that I have. But disinformation is something that we talk about so often that we get desensitized to it. It's like, oh yeah, that's a problem. Okay, is anyone doing anything about it? Not really, right? If we look at it differently, we'd say when the air and the water and the land was getting polluted, we all didn't like that. And we set up environmental protection agencies, and we said, pollution is unacceptable. Well, the neurons in our brain, I think, count. If we care about our lungs, I care about my neurons. And that is cognitive security, and we need to be thinking of it as data pollution and say, what are we going to be doing to improve pollution in that regard, or decrease pollution in that regard? We don't want more of it, right? So this is the last thought here, and we'll go right to speaking with Emma, is that I think our role as communicators in government is we are the compass. We're the ones, the humans, who can say, how do we take media and AI and keep transforming? And how do we make sure that we're staying honest to making that occur? So with that, let me now go to Emma, and we're going to have some Q&A and go from there.
Are we on?
I think so.
Good. Great to see you, Bob. Great presentation. I could talk to you for about 2 hours. There is so much I want to ask you. It's something that's in all of our interests, but especially my interests. I run CNBC for the Middle East. It's so nice to see you all. Thank you for joining us in this beautiful Creators HQ. So, Bob, I want to expand on some of the things that you mentioned. One thing terrifies me, but also excites me. Media are at a crossroads. Yes. I just had a meeting with my executive team about this today, and I said to you, some of the things that we're looking at, especially we appeal to investors at CNBC. Investors, you just said this, are using agents. People are waking up in the morning. Are they reading CNBC? Are they reading Bloomberg? Are they reading the FT? Can I have a show of hands in here? Who wakes up and looks at mainstream media in the morning? Yeah. Uh-oh. So.
We do.
So to me, it seems like something needs to change. We're at a crossroads. We need to create a new distribution model, or else, right?
There's two components to that. I think one is, I won't say the names, but I was asked by two major media companies that you would all know how to improve news. And I said, I'll tell you the answer, which is not to tell you how to do journalism better, is get out of the newsroom. Get out. You have to get into channels. If you don't get into channels, you're never going to get your story across. And the other thing is the financial model does have to change. And there's nothing wrong with making money if you're actually staying true to the principles of journalism, which is why journalists are journalists, right? So we need you to be successful.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that and kind of the importance of journalism, because I do believe we are looking today at influencers giving us the news, and I think there's a lot of problems with that, standards. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But when you look at these new distribution models, we're learning, and we've known this for a long time. When you do want to watch a CNBC interview or a Bloomberg interview, you're going to go on YouTube and you're going to seek it out. And we saw this with the U.S. election, the rise of the kind of podcast bros. You mentioned Joe Rogan. Donald Trump really won because people were seeking out content that they wanted to watch. So
Yes.
how do you think mainstream media can look at these new distribution models and really utilize them? Because we have everything at our fingertips now, on our tablets, on our phones. How do we utilize these amazing tools to really move forward as media and mainstream media?
This is my opinion, is that what I see is that people want news. I mean, look at Meta. People are going there every day because they want news, which can come from CNBC through Meta to them. What they divide on is opinion. And when journalists are having very strong opinions, then you start to say, okay, I either love what you're saying, I'm in, or I'm out. And I'm going to go now have my confirmation bias occur with someone else. And as you get exposed to other places, you say, wait a second, this person's actually interesting. I mean, Joe Rogan is interesting. Some of these people are interesting. So I think it's something that we just have to embrace. But I don't believe that journalism helps itself by being overly divisive. I think it really has a great role in telling the truth of the world and challenging people to tell that truth. There's a difference between challenging the truth and having an opinion, I think.
Yeah. And something you said, which I find really interesting and we've spoken about, is that trust is diffusing.
Yes.
Explain that a little bit for me, and then I want to ask you something else about that concept.
Yes. So I think at one point I got tired of getting yet another trust survey that said everyone was going down. And I won't name names there either. And I just said, okay, this is ridiculous. Let's look at what's really happening. And what you see is that there's, this is very obvious for a content creator group. There's gamers that people are they're listening to everything they have to say. There's Instagram stars, they're listening to everything they have to say. So the real question then is to say, okay, if the topic that I care about, if we said, the AI hub, who are the influencers worldwide who care about AI and new hubs and would be perfect people for us to talk to, or for you to interview, because they have a strong view and a great following. And there's something that when we think of audience expansion, if we're reaching people like that, their audience is getting introduced to us, right? And so if I'm CNBC or I'm Dubai, I'm thinking, how do I get the world to come in and learn more and actually go from there?
I think Dubai does a really good job of that, actually. And I think the region and the Gulf is really good at utilizing, and a lot of content creators, they've made it an economy that content creators want to move to, want to create content about. And it's so beautiful. You want to create content here.
Yeah.
It's hard not to. But what are the risks? Because, and now I'm old when it comes to influencers. I'm figuring out how to make a reel. TikTok is a lot, right? I don't know if any of you agree with me, but I have younger staff members who are in their 20s, and for them, it's such a natural thing. Whereas when you look at kind of the older generation, and apparently, and people leading newsrooms, they don't understand TikTok. That's probably why they're trying to ban it in the United States. How do we get everybody on the same page about these applications and about the new distribution models?
Yeah, I think there's things that we should compete with and things we should not. And so if you looked at if you go through the history of Facebook, for example, from when it first started and when it got success, it was really so engaging and people would come back to it so often. That's what drove the success of Facebook and allowed them to do all these other great things. But if they didn't have that, they wouldn't get there. So content creators are usually fantastic at getting people to come back all the time and get that steady diet of information. And so let them do that. Journalism can be the ones that influence them, or can take the ones that are setting trends, like we just heard for X, and interview them, because those are very relevant things. So I think we have to think of what our role is overall, and whether it's a government or media or a company, how do we play well with others as opposed to try to be better than them, because we won't be.
Do you see a big risk from kind of younger generations getting all of their news from influencers who are not necessarily...
Yes.
Yeah, like in journalism school, and you don't need to go to journalism school to be a journalist, but you do learn standards on the job about responsible reporting.
So this is something, so I do get to teach on how to combat mis and disinformation and do that on a global level. And when you look at the top 5 media sources for youth, and depend on what age, it doesn't really matter what age, there are no news outlets. It's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's X, it's TikTok, it's Discord, it's, and so that's where people are getting their news. And so that means that we have to be in those flows in order to reach them.
And one of the issues with something like Meta is there's an algorithm. So when
Yes.
you like something, you're going to be shown that thing that you like, that confirmation bias again and again. Talk to me a little bit about the issues with that and how I think big tech have a big responsibility here to combat this.
It's double-edged, right? Because let's say I live in Texas, so let's say I am a stereotypical Texan and I like to fish and hunt.
And you've got your boots on as
I
well.
got my boots
which are
on and all that, right?
fantastic.
So, right? So then I might want to get more stuff about fishing and hunting because that's what I care about, right? So the algorithm is working for me. It's when you come in and you're looking at something that's divisive, you're not getting both sides of the view. One thing that we know doesn't work is fact-checking. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, but we've studied fact-checking worldwide. No one cares. And the reason why is because by the time you check the fact, people are long gone, and the people you want to reach are not the ones coming back to fact-check. It's the people that are already on board. So we need to be more clever than that if we want to actually balance out the information. And this is something why the agent comment I made is so important. Think about billions of agents going around the world, gathering information to feed into applications that people are going to use. Think of like Perplexity and Pi and things like that. What's going to show up about what we care about? And that's something we need to think about, because if we don't, the vacuum is filled by other people. It could be competitors. It could be those who are disinforming. Who knows?
With all this in mind, from your research, when do people really turn to mainstream media? Is there ever a time, like during a breaking news event or something important, that mainstream media is still relied upon as a primary source?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that's, it kind of speaks to the value of journalism. Anytime something big is happening, it could be a calamity, could be an election, it could be anything that is an inflection point in our lives, we tend to want to go, where are the journalists that we can listen to? What's the channel we can listen to? That's not where we go to social channels to learn more. But at the same time, the people who are going to social channels all the time are more prone, because of confirmation bias, to believe in things that aren't true. And that is something that we also have to look at, is how do you actually, when people don't believe something is true, how do you introduce content to them over time so they actually move in the right direction? And over time can be years.
It's interesting, and what we're learning as mainstream media is that people and viewers want more specific coverage. So I cover the Middle East, and I have a team that covers China, a team that covers India, and you want somebody with authority to speak on that topic.
Exactly.
And even though I am an American, but I've lived here for many, many years and cover it, but actually you want an Arab journalist to be covering something in their region that they know deeply. You want somebody who has access to governments in the region or access to the government in China to really tell that story.
Yes.
So
That's
okay.
one of the reasons why I like content creators and journalism. Because if you think of this region of the world, people are very interested in what happens in this region. How to explain things that are occurring here in ways that people would resonate with them gives us more chance to have a global story, if we want to, right? But that opportunity is there. It's just a matter of how to calibrate to each region, whether we're speaking to China, we're speaking to the U.S., or whatever country.
Absolutely. I think we have maybe 1 more minute left,
Okay.
even though I want to have 30 more minutes. I want to ask you about inspiring kind of media professionals, a future generation of leaders. How should we be looking at all of these things we talked about, and what is kind of your one takeaway and one inspirational sort of a piece of advice for those in media and those in leadership trying to make decisions about this brave new world?
So despite what happens with tech, no matter what happens, the ability to tell a powerful story is going to be a skill or an art that will never go away. It's been with humans since the beginning, right? And so there's no better way to learn how to tell a great story and put it together than to be a journalist. And whether you stay in journalism your whole life, or you go into the government, or you go into private sector, you're trained really well. And so I think that's, my hope would be everyone who wants to be a content creator start in journalism. I was talking to Upton last night. He was, I think, at CNBC.
He was my former colleague, yeah.
Right. I mean, it's a great
and
example.
He's had great success since he's gone off on his own and been a creator. So
Perfect example.
I'm inspired. I'm not
Cool.
as worried as I was at the beginning of your presentation,
Good,
I think.
I'm
And I hope
glad.
you all are inspired as well. Let's give another round of applause. Bob, thank you so much.
Great, thank you.